I think people are way too hard on Tom Holland's Spider-Man. It feels like over the years there's been a concentrated effort to turn on this version of the character. Iron Man Jr., too much tech, no Uncle Ben, not enough struggle. You've probably heard all of these before. But I think the MCU has been asking a much more interesting question than people ever gave it credit for. What actually makes Peter Parker Peter Parker? Is it Uncle Ben? Is it growing up broke? Is it Gwen, Harry, or MJ as we traditionally know her? Or are those just the circumstances surrounding Peter rather than the thing that actually defines him? When Tom Holland enters the MCU, he feels like the Spider-Man who has everything. He has the Avengers, Stark Tech, mentors, friends, and a support system unlike any live-action Peter Parker before him. But then something interesting starts happening from the end of that first movie on. Every film takes something away from him. One by one, the safety nets disappear until by the end of No Way Home, there's almost nothing left except Peter Parker himself. And that's why I think these movies succeed. They aren't asking what it takes to become Spider-Man. They're asking what happens when you strip away everything that makes this version of the character different from the ones that came before. When all the advantages disappear, is there still enough left to call him Peter Parker? And I think that answer is yes. So let's start back at the beginning. It's a Spider-Verse joke, but we're not talking about that movie today. The MCU Spider-Man's made a lot of changes to Peter Parker's origin. Gone is the thief Peter lets get away, and gone is the fateful bullet that kills Uncle Ben and sets him down a path to becoming Spider-Man. This is foundational stuff to the character's mythology, like full stop, very important, that these movies simply just leave out. But I'm here to ask, does it matter that much? Because it's important to remember where we were when MCU's Spider-Man kicked off his journey. We had already had the Raimi trilogy, 2 amazing Spider-Man movies, Spider-Man the Animated Series, Spectacular Spider-Man, Ultimate Spider-Man had been going for forever at that point. Like, there have been dozens of Spider-Man projects that had gone over his origins. Most audiences already knew Peter Parker's origin by heart. Because of that, I actually think these movies do a decent job of not showing you his origin, but letting you feel it without exactly replaying it. I often think back to Peter's first conversation with Tony in Civil War and the way he explains why he does what he does. There's a weight on his shoulders that feels cumbersome, a mistake that he will never quite shake. Do I think it's odd that Uncle Ben is never explicitly mentioned outside of a suitcase cameo in Far From Home? Yes, absolutely. But in these early appearances, I definitely still feel the weight of him. Instead of retelling Peter's origin, the MCU chooses to show us the early days of Spider-Man, and I absolutely love that decision. Homecoming is filled with great moments of Peter establishing himself within his neighborhood in Queens. I remember being a little disappointed at the time that we never got to see him swinging around Manhattan, because I do love that classic Spider-Man imagery of him soaring between skyscrapers, but keeping him grounded in Queens ends up reinforcing exactly who this Peter is. He's reckless, he's excited, and more than anything, he's desperate to prove himself. After all, this is a kid who went from fighting alongside the Avengers in Berlin to suddenly being told by the same adults who recruited him that he needs to stay home. Using Queens to symbolize those growing pains gets right to the heart of what this first movie is all about. What's so fun about these early moments is that you're watching Peter recognize in real time what being Spider-Man actually means. A lot has been said about the drive to the school dance, but what I really love about that scene is the realization on Peter's face that, oh shit, this is just what life is going to be now. There will always be another threat around the corner, that the people he loves will never truly be safe. And by the end, yeah, sure, he stops the Vulture, he even saves him. But Liz has to move, her family is torn apart, and Peter lost the girl. It's small tragedy compared to what's still to come, but it's the first real reminder that doing the right thing doesn't always mean getting a happy ending. More importantly, it's the first time the trilogy takes something away from Peter. And it won't be the last. Because while Homecoming ends with Peter losing Liz, he still has plenty of people to catch him when he falls. Which brings us to the biggest safety net of them all, Tony Stark. You can't talk about the origin changes in these movies without bringing up the Avengers of it all, or even more importantly, the Iron Man of it all. Throughout this character's time in the MCU, the name Iron Man Jr. has been thrown a lot. And I'm here to say that I actually think Peter's ties to Iron Man in these movies make total sense, especially when you take into account both characters' journeys in the MCU up until this point. Because remember, while yes, Tony was a safety net for Peter, he's just one in a series of safety nets that ultimately gets ripped away from him. A lot has been said about the way Peter looks up to Tony in these movies, that he idolizes him too much. But I think it's important to remember that Tom's Peter is a kid throughout this trilogy and in the MCU. He's a kid without a father and mother, without Uncle Ben, a kid growing up with amazing abilities he's not quite sure of in a world where legends and heroes exist in his own backyard. There isn't a lot of stability in his life outside of Aunt May and Ned. So to me, it makes sense that he latches on to Tony. Not just because Tony has resources, but because in Peter's mind, Tony represents something that he can aspire to. In a world full of heroes, Tony picked him and told him that he could be more. Peter is a confused kid going through something life-altering. Why wouldn't he latch onto that? That isn't Peter becoming Iron Man Jr. It's Peter looking for guidance through something that at times is wonderful, but also really scary and confusing. And it's worth mentioning that even Tony doesn't want Peter to become Iron Man Jr. He says as much after the attack on the ferry. You can really tell Tony wants what's best for this kid. He sees unlimited potential in him. He sees brilliance, all the things people probably told Tony he had when he was younger. But he also knows that Peter can be so much more than just another version of him. But what happens when that safety net gets taken away? By the end of Far From Home, Peter finally realizes that the world doesn't need the next Iron Man. They need Spider-Man. He realizes he's all the things Tony saw in him and more. He doesn't need to be someone else. He just needs to be himself. Tony may have helped guide him, but Peter has to walk this path his own way. Peter accepts that he will never be the next Iron Man. And you know what? That's okay, because he's Spider-Man. But the tragedy of Tony is that his death becomes yet another heartbreaking loss for Peter, another test for him to rise against. And while he's dealing with that, he also has to deal with the loss of his secret identity, arguably the most precious thing he has, the thing that he's only shared with the people closest to him. I always think back to that line that he tells MJ in No Way Home, where he says that the most normal he ever felt was when he told her who he was on the bridge during their school trip. Because once she knew, everyone he wanted to know knew. He finally felt secure, and then that gets stolen from him. And in No Way Home, we see Peter truly come to terms with the fact that he will probably never get an easy way out, no matter how badly he wants one. No matter how young he is, the world, the city will always need Spider-Man, and he will always need to rise to the occasion. You know, I think it's easy to dismiss Andrew and Toby's appearances as just cameos for the sake of nostalgia baiting in No Way Home, but I think what they do is so much more important than that. They give Peter a glimpse into his future. In them, he sees two people not just older than him, but from literal universes apart, who have gone through similar things to him and still managed to rise above it and do the right thing. And it's in seeing them that I think Peter realizes that as hard as it was to lose May, as hard as it is to let go of everyone he's ever known, this is what it takes to be Spider-Man. And if these guys can do it, so can he. It will be hard, it will be tragic, but he will find a way. When I look at the totality of these movies, I don't see a betrayal of the character. I see a different way of getting to his core through one simple question. What does it take to be Peter Parker? Because it's easy to do the right thing when the world and resources are at your fingertips. But what happens when those things get taken away piece by piece? When desperation pushes you closer to the edge, will you still rise up to be what people around you need you to be, even if it hurts you in the process? I won't deny that Tom's Peter is in many ways a complete flip on what we've come to know as Spider-Man fans over the years. But when I look back on the character's history, we have so many examples of different interpretations of Spider-Man. And ultimately, I do think Tom's version ends up in a place where we get back to the core of what Peter Parker and Spider-Man represent. It's the selflessness, the need to do the right thing, even if it hurts you in the process. Tom's Spider-Man may have had Stark Tech and the Avengers and the Mentors, but by the end of his time in the MCU, he's lost so much more than he's gained. And he still chooses to do right by the people around him and the world. And in the end, isn't that what being Spider-Man is all about? Thanks for watching, everyone. This is a video that I've wanted to make for a very, very long time, and then realized I had to make it in a very short span of time because Brand New Day comes out in a few days. So thanks for watching. If you liked the video, why not subscribe? And this is another video that YouTube thinks you would like. Goodbye.